This is not a tale for the faint-hearted. The events that unfolded were violent, graphic, and deeply disturbing. Though the Titanic, the Lusitania, and the Lexington often dominate discussions of maritime tragedy, few incidents rival the sheer horror experienced during the sinking of the Arctic. While its death toll was smaller than those other disasters, the ordeal aboard the Arctic remains one of the most harrowing I have ever studied. The Arctic was the third vessel built for the Collins Line. Launched in January 1850 and completing her maiden voyage that October, she was a fast, impressive ship, earning the title Clipper of the Seas as she captured the Blue Ribbon. The Collins Line was known for sturdy ships and skilled crews, often emerging as heroes of the sea. In 1852, one of their ships, the Pacific, saved 16 passengers from the wreck of the Jesse Stevens during a violent storm. Despite these successes, the company struggled against political pressures. Washington politicians, eager to see the Collins Line fail, demanded that the ships always maintain full speed, regardless of weather. This policy frequently placed vessels in peril. Initially, the Arctic thrived, but misfortune struck repeatedly. She grounded in 1853, collided with a rock in 1854, and later suffered hull strain following engine overhauls. The Arctic was a wooden paddle steamer, boasting lavish first-class accommodations and comfortable second-class quarters. First class featured 2 grand saloons for dining and lounging. She measured 2,956 tons, 284 feet in length, with a 45-foot beam. Her design included 1 red-topped funnel, 2 masts, 6 lifeboats, 4 on davits, 2 on deck, and the ability to sail under canvas if her engines failed, as her sister ship had famously done in 1851. On the morning of September 20th, 1854, the Arctic departed Liverpool, carrying a mix of prominent families and distinguished passengers. The wives and children of Edward Collins, James Brown, bank president, and George Allen, attorney for the ship's engine builders, were all on board. These families were closely acquainted and remained together throughout the voyage. Other notable passengers included the French Duke of Gramont, traveling as a diplomat, Captain Pratt and his family, who had survived a recent shipwreck, children's book publisher Mellon Day, and English architect-painter Frederick Catherwood. Captain James Luce commanded the Arctic with experience and precision. His son Willie, 11 years old and chronically ill, accompanied him for the first time on this return journey. Of the 20 key individuals highlighted, only 3 would survive the catastrophe. In total, 233 passengers and 175 crew sailed on the Arctic, totaling 408 souls. The voyage began peacefully. Passengers enjoyed socializing, fine meals, music, and the fresh autumn air. As the ship entered the mid-North Atlantic, temperatures dropped, keeping most passengers indoors. Young Willie Luce spent much of his time in his cabin, occasionally visiting Millie Brown. The Arctic maintained a steady 13 knots, about 15 miles per hour, as she neared the Grand Banks off Newfoundland. Meanwhile, a small iron ship, the French fishing steamer Vesta, departed Newfoundland bound for France. At 250 tons and 152 feet long, she was only half the Arctic's length but advanced for her time, featuring a propeller and 4 watertight compartments. With over 150 aboard, Vesta sailed into the same waters as the Arctic by the second day of her journey. On September 27th, the fog hung heavy and cold. Arctic's captain, wary of reduced visibility, was constrained by regulations demanding full speed. At noon, a dark silhouette emerged from the fog. The Vesta, under full sail and steam, closing in at 10 knots. A lookout shouted, "Stop! Steamer ahead!" The officer on the bridge had mere moments to decide. Turning left, the quicker escape, violated maritime protocol requiring ships to pass on the right. Meanwhile, the Vesta's crew attempted their own maneuver, setting the stage for disaster. Arctic's engines were ordered to stop, and the ship began a slow port turn. But Vesta continued to turn to starboard, heading straight into Arctic's path. Captain Luce emerged just in time to see the Vesta strike Arctic's starboard bow, piercing the wooden hull above the waterline. The bowsprit of the Vesta impaled the crew quarters. Arctic's forward momentum carried her into the Vesta, tearing into her iron hull. The collision twisted Vesta violently while the Arctic continued forward. her paddle box damaged but largely unchecked. Inspecting the damage, Arctic's crew initially saw the impact as mostly above the waterline. Orders were sent below to assess the hull. Meanwhile, the Vesta was a scene of devastation. Passengers screamed, the cargo hold flooded, and the crew struggled to control the situation. A lifeboat launched from Vesta, carrying 12 men, drifted toward the Arctic, only to be pulled under her starboard paddle wheel, destroyed. And all but one occupant perished. Arctic's captain, realizing the severity, re-engaged engines to double back toward the sinking Vesta. Lifeboats were lowered, but visibility and panic complicated efforts. As the crew attempted to control the flooding, it became evident that the wooden ship lacked watertight bulkheads. The Arctic was slowly sinking, while passengers and crew labored tirelessly at pumps. Their hands blistered and bloody. Captain Luce ordered the quartermasters to arm themselves and keep passengers from crowding the lifeboats prematurely. Signal cannons were fired as makeshift distress calls, manned by engineer Stuart Holland, who would remain at his post until the very end. Below, stokers stayed with the boilers, understanding that the engines were their best chance for survival. Despite remaining steam power, the Arctic's progress slowed as water rose. Luce directed lifeboats to be loaded simultaneously, prioritizing women and children, intending to keep them together. But the first major act of mutiny occurred. The ship's butcher and several sailors prematurely cut their lifeboat free, disappearing into the fog, never to be seen again. Crew loyalty faltered as survival instincts took over. Male passengers tried to support the captain, moving to load the aft port lifeboat with women and children, but chaos ensued. Rogue crewmen stormed the boat, axes in hand, and the forward tackle failed. Women and children fell into the sea and drowned. Some of these attackers survived and later blamed Captain Luce for obstructing their escape, despite their own cowardice. With the main steam pumps failing and the hand pumps insufficient to halt flooding, Arctic's last lifeboats were prepared. Balam's boat, partially full and mostly crew, drifted away despite Luce's orders to remain and rescue others. The remaining passengers and loyal officers began constructing an improvised raft using spars, doors, and debris on the aft port deck. The surviving group aboard Arctic split into 3 factions. First, those loyal to Captain Luce who worked to save others and assemble the raft. Second, female passengers, including the Collins and Brown families who prayed and awaited their fate. Third, a group of drunken, violent passengers looted supplies, drank heavily, and harassed women. Axes and defensive measures were employed, but killings and assaults likely occurred as the ship sank. The Arctic, resisting the sea for over 4 hours, began to lose stability. Fourth Officer Francis Dorian stayed with Luce, defending the raft from theft. Stuart Holland continued firing the distress cannon. Stewardess Anna Downer operated the hand pumps until the last possible moment. Despite Captain Luce telling her she could leave, the raft was eventually freed from the ship with several aboard. Dorian's boat was overtaken by ruffians. With every escape route gone, Captain Luce handed out lifebelts to remaining passengers, focusing on families and his son, Willie. He guided his son to the bridge, recognizing that survival chances were slim. As the ship sank by the stern, the deckhouse tore apart. Passengers were thrown into a heap against the funnel, water poured in, and the signal cannon discharged its final round. Captain Luce clung to Willie as the vessel dragged them beneath the waves. Luce resurfaced to find his son at a distance and began swimming toward him. The forward paddle box, destroyed during the collision, floated to the surface like a raft. Survivors, including Luce and George Allen, climbed atop it, witnessing family members drown around them. A gale stirred, and the blood in the water attracted sharks, claiming others. Darkness fell, and from a dozen people on the paddle box, only 3 remained: Captain Luce, George Allen, and the sailor who had rescued the lone French survivor from Vesta. The Canadian bark Huron, en route to Quebec, discovered Dorian's boat and rescued about 30 survivors. They also found the raft with 1 survivor still aboard. Huron later rendezvoused with the ship Lebanon, allowing some survivors to sail directly to New York, while others remained with Huron to Canada. Meanwhile, Vesta, despite her shattered bow, managed to reach port safely due to watertight compartments and skilled seamanship. The Arctic's sinking shocked the maritime world. Some speculated that transferring survivors to Vesta might have saved more lives, but her structure could not have supported the extra weight of 400 people. Officer Balaam later chartered ships to search for additional survivors, finding none. Sources vary, but roughly 88 people survived the sinking of the Arctic, while 320 perished, including every woman and child. News of the disaster took 2 weeks to reach the United States, finally confirmed on October 10th, when survivors, including Captain Luce, arrived from Canada. The grim details quickly emerged. Officer Balaam, questioned about abandoning the ship, attempted to shift blame onto Captain Luce. Firemen and crew who stormed lifeboats also condemned Luce to deflect scrutiny from their own cowardice. Luce himself bore guilt, particularly for leaving Chief Officer Gorley behind, whose lifeboat was never seen again. He speculated that Gorley could have maintained better discipline during evacuation. Captain Luce never returned to sea. No formal inquiry was held, likely because politicians in Washington, who had enforced high-speed mandates, wanted to avoid accountability. Edward Collins, owner of the Collins Line, lost half his family and was never the same. James Brown lost 6 family members, and George Allen witnessed his wife and infant die but survived. All 3 men suffered lifelong depression. Meanwhile, the Cunard Line, competitors of Collins, celebrated the disaster with a parade in New York City to advertise their safety and security, highlighting lifeboat preparedness. The Vesta sailed until 1875, sinking off Spain, with no known images aside from a rudimentary sketch published immediately after the collision showing her damaged bow. The Arctic itself was never found. Her wooden hull likely disintegrated on the sea floor, leaving few relics. Bodies were mostly unrecovered. The ship's name, Arctic, was avoided in later fleet namings. White Star Line opted to name a ship Celtic instead. No proper memorials exist for the vessel, crew, or passengers. Despite the tragedy being largely forgotten, the courage of some individuals remained notable. 4th Officer Francis Dorian defended the raft until the very end. Engineer Stuart Holland stayed at the signal cannon. Stewardess Anna Downer continued pumping water until she could do no more. Captain Luce personally handed out lifebelts and attempted to save as many as possible. Ultimately, the Arctic disaster serves as a haunting reminder of human frailty, bravery, and chaos at sea. It illustrates the perils of rigid regulations, the consequences of cowardice, and the fleeting heroism that emerges in the darkest moments. While forgotten by history, the Arctic story stands as a grim testament to the dangers faced by 19th-century ocean liners. I truly hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribing for more content, and I'll see you in the next one.